He's homesteading in Nebraska territory and interacting with Plains Indians, and there's rising tensions. He's fighting in war in the South during the Civil War and writing home to his wife about 3 horses shot out from beneath him and bullets falling out of his coat. This kind of gave me an opportunity to build drama, as I mentioned before, through music, that I wouldn't have had without that first-person narration. And so hopefully that's something people find as satisfying as I did. This is a story about how, first of all, Iowa came to be. Grenville Dodge conducted the first survey across the state of Iowa, coming from the Rock Island Railroad in Illinois, and landing at the Missouri River in Council Bluffs. And when I first started reading about this material, I didn't understand just how momentous that was. He was on the frontier at Council Bluffs. I never really thought of Iowa that way. 1850s or so, 1854, 55. He's on the frontier of civilization. Nebraska's not a state yet, Kansas is not a state yet. So he really is pushing west. He's part of that sort of brave group that's trying to establish a connection to the Pacific Ocean. The Mormon migration is coming through Council Bluffs, the Oregon Trail, things like that, overland migrants. And Dodge thinks this is the perfect place for a railroad. So outside of Civil War interest and outside of railroad interest, I've sunk my teeth into this as a piece of American history, how these states came to be. So this is a story of how the America we know came to be, and a lot of it happened right at this time when we were about to split apart with the Civil War. So to see his drive, his motivation, and bravery in a lot of cases informed me more about the country I live in. And I'm really fortunate in this story that Union Pacific hired a photographer named Andrew Russell to go along on the build and take a lot of photographs of the first Transcontinental Railroad. And what you see is through Nebraska, pretty simple, pretty flat. And that was Dodge's angle. Let's build here. It's pretty flat. They get to Wyoming and the Rocky Mountains, get to Utah, and it's quite a different story. And so, yeah, there's a lot of moments where you think it must have taken will, it must have taken drive. But you dig into it, and you know what? They're contractors. They're organizations and companies who grade earth, and organizations and companies who lay down railroad ties, who ship in wood from Chicago. That kind of blew my mind. They're laying the track, and they're bringing in wood from Chicago and from Omaha on the track they just laid. So they're building as they go. And at the same time, this is early America, and you can kind of do what you want. Dodge, later in his career, he has government contracts to deliver food and rations to native tribes on the plains, and he made millions doing that. So there's 2 parts to that question, which I think are, how do they do this? How do they pull it off? And also, America is forming while they pull it off. Laws come later that say, the Grant administration can't just hire his friends. And contracts need to go to the lowest bidder, not the highest bidder. So it's been interesting to me to see how the nation changed. But I think this is an important point. People don't wait around for it to change, and they didn't wait around for modern laws or these things to come along. They built, and they pushed, and they discovered, and they connected, and people filled in after them. They laid down the track, people filled in the West, and that I think has been fascinating. Anytime you learn about an older figure, you sort of put them into modern situations that you've seen or you can relate to, or you think of people you know in your own life. Dodge was described as a rapid thinker, a rapid talker. He couldn't hold his tongue. And one of my subjects said he didn't really have the manner of the Victorian era in which he was in. And so maybe he didn't make friends too quickly. He was very on task. He was an engineer. And maybe he didn't have too much nuance. He said, we're going to do it this way. And he didn't really suffer fools, I think. So he didn't elevate in status as much as some of his counterparts, Ulysses S. Grant, William Tecumseh Sherman, these other famous Civil War generals. Dodge doesn't have the reputation that they have in history, but he was extremely competent and capable. He's kind of like a Forrest Gump through this American history. It's a way, at least for me, you know, you get an assignment to tell the story of a person you've never heard of, and you're thinking, geez, what's this? But this has been a great opportunity. It's not just an Iowa story, it's a national story, but to learn about the history of the country. And okay, here's Dodge at Lincoln's inauguration, he's there. Here's Dodge at the Battle of Atlanta, he's there. Here's Dodge building rail through the South to transport Union troops. And here he is in Utah at Promontory, the famous photo where he's shaking hands where the railroads meet. That's Dodge. So there's a interesting, he's almost a vessel through which to understand this era of American history. Making a documentary film is certainly all about the person's story and the history and the learning and the writing. But you also have to make it accessible for people. I don't want people to sit down and watch my film and think, oh boy, here we go, let's learn something. You know, I want them to be drawn in, be pulled in by it. I do that through music, imagery, of course. You know, this project has allowed me to research Civil War imagery that I wasn't familiar with, bodies on battlefields, real images that are halting, but also like close-ups of young people's face. And you start to see they're not that dissimilar from me, you know, they're just in a different time. I've supported those images with music that I took great care in finding. The music, I wanted to have instrumentation from that period. We have a music library we can draw on, of course, but a lot of it is modern instrumentation. And so I'm trying to be selective in that instrumentation. There's a song in the film I've kind of referred to as Dodge's theme, and I used it in the trailer, which people may have seen. When I was getting into this character, Dodge, I think there's a habit sometimes to just automatically decide he's a hero. You know, your main character, the protagonist, literally. And I always try to find the nuance there and find what drives him, what does he want, what propels him. And this song for me was sort of like a call from the wild, telling him to push west, to pulling him west. He makes this trek from Massachusetts, where he's born, all the way through, you know, to Illinois, the Rock Island Railroad, and then to Iowa, where it's frontier. He makes the first survey across Iowa. So this song, in a way, in the story, is calling him west and pulling him. And I think that creates a piece of drama that the viewer can attach to and opens them up to the story in a way that's maybe more powerful than lecture or just timelines of events, you know what I mean? And I hope that that has the same power for a viewer that it had for me.